Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. So today's case, it is a pretty infamous case that involves a very infamous video. And the infamous video that I'm talking about is called 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. Have you ever heard of this video? I hope none of you have seen it because it is known as one of the most disturbing videos on the internet. And this video went viral back in 2007. So this is before social media, the way we know social media today. People were emailing all of their contacts saying things like, this is the worst video you will ever see in your life. It will completely mess you up. It's so disturbing. Do not watch this. And of course, when you tell people not to watch something, people watch it. And when people opened this video, 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, it was pretty low quality video. It was very grainy footage. The setting of the video was very remote. It was very eerie. And before viewers could even catch their breath, one of the men pulled out a hammer and started attacking the other man that they had captive. And they start beating this man to death, all on video. And this murder was one of the most gruesome murders you could think of. Bones were breaking, blood was spurting everywhere, to the point where the victim, they basically didn't have a face anymore. And then this video was uploaded onto the internet for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to see. It was uploaded onto gore sites and it went viral. And still to this very day, it is known as one of the most gruesome videos on the internet. And who created this video? Well, it was an evil duo. They were serial killers known as the Maniacs. 2 of the most cold, psychotic, and evil people I have ever come across. And that is what we are going to be covering today. So prepare yourselves for today's case because it is a lot. And let's dive in. Before we get started, I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, and that is ExpressVPN. And I use ExpressVPN all of the time. Like literally just the other week, there was a news story about Wi-Fi being hacked in train stations all across the UK. And they were hacked at the same time. It was widespread. It was scary. And then a couple of days after that Wi-Fi attack happened, I had to spend the day traveling around London. And I had to connect to public Wi-Fi in coffee shops, in restaurants, in train stations. And I was getting so paranoid that hackers were lurking. But I felt so much better because I always make sure that I am using ExpressVPN on all of my devices. Because with ExpressVPN, my internet traffic is encrypted and rerouted through their secure servers. And in today's world, we share so much information on the internet. I was sending emails, uploading photos and videos, making payments. And ExpressVPN is so easy to use and download. All you have to do is just click this button and that's it. You are protected. So I would highly recommend all of you using ExpressVPN, especially if you are out in public and you connect to public Wi-Fi often. But there is one other amazing benefit of using ExpressVPN, and that is that it allows you to access content from all over the world. All you have to do is change your geolocation to any country you like, and then you have access to all of the TV shows and the movies on Netflix from all over the world. How amazing does that sound? And I cannot even tell you how useful I find this for my research when I'm trying to locate certain true crime documentaries. It is just so incredibly useful. I don't know how I would function without ExpressVPN anymore. So if you guys wanted to try out ExpressVPN for yourselves, then you can go and get 3 months of ExpressVPN for free by going to expressvpn.com/Danielle or by going to the link in my description box. Thank you again to ExpressVPN for sponsoring today's video, but thank you to every single one of you watching right now because truly without all of you guys, I wouldn't get opportunities like this. And now let's jump into today's case. So we have 2 perpetrators in today's case. We have Victor Sayenko, who was the eldest out of the 2. He was born on the 1st of March 1988, making him a Pisces. And then the younger of the 2, Igor Sopronyuk, was born just 7 weeks later on the 10th of April 1988, making him an Aries. And both boys were born in the city of Dnipro, Ukraine, or the city of Dnipropetrovsk, which is what the city used to be known as. And this is where the rest of today's case takes place. And both boys were born into very privileged families. Victor's dad was a computer engineer who worked in the prosecution's office. And then Igor's dad was a pilot who spent a long time working for the Ukrainian president. So because of this, both of their dads, but especially Igor's dad, the one that worked for the president, they had a lot of powerful connections, they had a lot of money, and this definitely plays into this case, 100%. And the 2 boys, they first met in school and they bonded bonded very quickly and they became like best friends, and they would be lifelong friends. They bonded over having very similar backgrounds. They were both very wealthy. They were both very spoilt. They were literally the definition of children that whatever they wanted, they got. They also had a third best friend, a young boy called Alexander, and he was from a poorer background. He was not wealthy. He didn't have any privilege. His parents were not powerful or anything like that. He was kind of like the third wheel to the evil duo, and Alexander would do anything and everything that Igor and Victor would say. And from a very young age, all three of them, but especially Igor and Victor, they were the definition of trouble. They were always acting out in class. They were bullies. They were always so mean to the younger children. They really would pick on anyone that was younger than them or smaller. They also would get into trouble with the law very early on in their life. One of their favorite things to do was to throw rocks at moving trains and smash the windows on the trains. But because of Igor and Victor's powerful parents, they never faced any repercussions for any of their behavior. And this will be a recurring thing throughout this case. So now the boys, they move into their teenage years and things just get worse. They were skipping class all the time. They were starting fights all the time with the other students in their school. They really were your stereotypical bullies. One of their favorite things to do was literally just beat up younger children, but also steal from younger children as well. Steal anything that they could. There was one time where Igor beat up an 8th grade student and stole their bike and then gifted that bike to Victor. There was one time where Igor was caught glue sniffing. Another time, Victor assaulted a female teacher. Both of them also became incredibly fascinated with Nazi ideology. They idolized Hitler. They bought Hitler's autobiography and his manifestos, and they would spend hours poring over these. They also painted Hitler-style mustaches on themselves. They would also graffiti swastikas all over the local area. And Igor, coincidentally, actually shares a birthday with Hitler, and he was very proud of this. This was almost like his claim to fame. He would tell everybody and everyone that he shared a birthday with Hitler. So they're not great people, are they? Even as teenagers, no, not great people. But every single time they did something wrong, they got away with it because they would just call up their powerful parents who had a lot of money and they had very powerful connections. And their parents would get them off. And it's like, are you being serious? One of them assaulted a teacher. So we've spoken about the fact that they're bullies. Through and through, they are bullies. However, they also got bullied themselves. So they were actually bullied by kids that were bigger and older than them. And as you can imagine, they did not like this one bit. So Igor, Victor, and kind of Alexander, but mainly Igor and Victor, they were determined to become the biggest, strongest, toughest kids in the whole school. They wanted to be kings of their school and rule the school and bully everyone. They wanted to be the top dog. And they came up with a plan on how they were going to become the toughest kids in the school. And that was to eradicate any fears that they had. And their thinking was that if they eradicate their fears, they would become invincible. And therefore, if they were invincible, they would be the toughest kids in the school and in the local area. So they went on the internet to figure out how they were exactly supposed to get over any fears that they had. And the internet gave them an answer, which was exposure therapy. And this exposure therapy would lead them down a very, very dark and disturbing path. They learned that exposure therapy, it was basically to confront your fears, to expose yourself to them in hopes that you will conquer that fear the more you're exposed to it. So Igor and Victor, they decided to first overcome a fear that they both had, which was of heights. And in order to do this, they went up to the 14th floor of a very, very tall building. They went onto a balcony, they went over the railing of that balcony, and they would just hang there off of the railing for hours. And first of all, I'm like, oh my God, they must have been incredibly strong to do that. But it also really, really freaks me out because I'm very, very scared of heights as well. And they kept doing this. They kept going to this building. They kept dangling themselves off the railing until they didn't feel anxious anymore. And it worked. They did get over their fear of heights. So then they turned to their friend Alexander and they said, Alexander, what are you scared of? What can we tackle for you? And Alexander was scared of blood. Every time he saw blood, he nearly passed out. So Igor and Victor, what did they decide to do? They decided Okay, well, to get over your fear of blood, you need to expose yourself to as much blood as possible. And how were they going to do this? Well, unfortunately, it was animals. And I do have to give a very, very strong warning right now because we are going to be talking about animal abuse. What all three of these vile, evil people do to animals is absolutely despicable. So I'm just need to warn you, prepare yourselves, because Igor suggested that the easiest way to get blood was to extract it from a living animal. And round by where they lived, there was a lot of forest and there was a lot of wild dogs around. So one day, all three of them decided that they were going to catch one of these wild dogs. And when they caught this wild dog, all three of them disemboweled the dog, which is just absolutely horrific to think about. Like, ugh, why? And obviously there was blood everywhere, and Alexander, having a fear of blood, he nearly passed out. He was really, really struggling. And Igor's answer to this was that they just had to keep doing this over and over again. So this now became a regular thing that all three of them did. All three of them would regularly now go into the forest and catch wild dogs. And they would disembowel the dogs. And they did this over and over again until Alexander wasn't afraid of blood. And Igor and Victor especially, they loved this. They are sick and twisted and they were getting such a thrill out of harming animals. And each time they harmed an animal, their acts were becoming more and more sadistic. Because they moved on to different animals, they then started to hunt cats as well as dogs. They then started to hunt pets. So people's pet dogs and pet cats. And now what they would do is that they would drain all of the blood from these animals' bodies. And then the trio would hang the animal's body from a nearby tree and then pose for selfies with the dead animal. They even started filming themselves committing these sadistic, torturous acts on animals so they could watch it back later and enjoy it over and over again. And this definitely became a signature move for the evil duo, but they're obviously a trio now. This became their signature, filming their attacks. And at this point in the case, the trio now had over 100 different videos of them torturing and killing animals. And I'm just going to give you an example of possibly the worst of the videos of torturing animals. And again, I know I've already given you a warning, but I don't think anything can prepare you for what I'm about to say. So one example is the trio kidnapped a kitten. They took the kitten back to Igor's garage, nailed it to a wooden cross, crucifixion style. I just want to point out that the kitten is alive, by the way, when they're doing this. They then filled the kitten's mouth with glue, so no one could hear the kitten screaming and making noise because of how much pain they would be in. They then took it in turns, using a pistol to shoot the kitten with rubber bullets. And this lasted for hours, this torture of this kitten. And the kitten was alive throughout the whole thing. And on this video, you can just hear the trio laughing and joking about what they're doing. They're finding it so fun. And then tragically, after a number of hours of torturing this kitten, the kitten sadly lost its life. And that is just one of over 100 videos that they had. These boys, all three of them, they make me sick. So at this point, Alexander, he has gotten over his phobia of blood. So technically they should stop. But of course they're not going to, because they're not actually doing it to cure a phobia. They're doing it because they're sick and twisted individuals. But now they're escalating because the group decided that they wanted to start extracting blood from people. Now, they don't exactly go about it in the same way. They don't go around disemboweling people like they did to all of the animals. But what they do is they find younger kids. It was mainly kids that they always picked on, people that were smaller than them. So they would go around the neighborhood and find younger, smaller kids and basically just beat them up, but beat them up so that they were a bloody mess, so that there was blood everywhere. And it was mainly Igor and Victor that did this. They would beat up these younger kids, they would punch them over and over again, they would break their noses, they would punch them in their eye sockets, they would beat them up until they were lying in a pool of blood. The victims would suffer broken bones, concussions, some of them even had permanently disfigured faces because of the attacks. These attacks were serious. And if you haven't noticed, Igor is is definitely the dominant one. He is the leader of the group. He is the one that is in charge. He is the most sadistic out of all of them. He is the one that is always telling the other two what to do. And he is also the one that has the most powerful dad. His dad was the one that worked for the Ukrainian president. So when they're going around their local neighborhood beating up these younger kids, of course there were witnesses, of course they were found and reported, but every single time Igor's dad got them off. They never faced any punishment for what they did, even though there were witnesses, even though these younger kids reported them to the police, all because Igor's dad was that powerful. So the three of them have now finished high school and they all get jobs. Victor becomes a security guard, Alexander becomes a construction worker, and what did Igor do? Well, Igor basically did nothing. Igor's dad bought him a new car because, you know, he gets everything that he wants and he doesn't have to work for a single thing in his life. So because Igor now has a new car, he decides to become an unlicensed taxi driver. This was completely illegal. He put a fake taxi sign in his car and he just started picking up random people off the street pretending to be a taxi driver. And Igor wasn't ever interested in doing anything legal or by the books. He wanted to live a life of crime for the thrill of it. So he had this unlicensed taxi because he wanted to pick up unsuspecting victims. He wanted to pick them up in his taxi and rob them. He would drive around the wealthy areas of town, just looking for people that needed a ride, needed a taxi. He would then drive them to a remote area where Victor and Alexander would be waiting for him. Then all three of them would assault the victim and then steal any valuables that they had on them. They would then just leave the victim in the middle of nowhere and drive off. And they did this over and over again. This was their routine. Multiple people sometimes in one day. There were so many victims, so many unsuspecting victims that were assaulted by this trio, beaten to a bloody pulp. And this is just absolutely horrific. All of these people are just being assaulted. And again, if anyone ever reported them, Igor's dad would just get the charges dropped. And at this point, it turns out that Alexander had had enough. The violence and the crime was getting a little bit too serious for him. And the only reason why he stopped committing crime was because he didn't have the same privileges as the other two. He didn't have rich, powerful parents that could bail him out of anything, and he was scared that he would go to prison one day. So that is the only reason why he stopped. Not because he wanted to. So he's not like a good person or anything like that. No. Far from it. So Alexander dropped out, so the evil trio now became the evil duo. And this is where the sick and twisted acts just get so much worse from this moment on. Because after Alexander left them, this is around 2006 now. The pair are currently 18 years old, and this is when the internet was really exploding. YouTube itself was only like a year old. Mobile phones with cameras were only just really becoming a thing. And it was pretty much the first time in history where anyone could record a video and put it on the internet for possibly millions of people all over the world to see. Igor and Victor would spend hours on YouTube watching all different kinds of videos. However, if you hadn't guessed, Igor and Victor, their tastes in videos are very gruesome, graphic, extreme. And even though back in 2006, 2007, you could find more extreme videos on YouTube, there wasn't as many restrictions, it still wasn't violent enough for Igor and Victor. So they left YouTube and they found their way onto more extreme websites. They found themselves on gore websites where they could watch torture videos, murder videos, rape videos, snuff films, all types of videos that are very much illegal and disturbing. And it turns out that when the two of them found these films, these videos that they were watching on these gore sites, the duo decided that they wanted to create those kinds of videos themselves. I mean, they basically already had. They had already created over 100 videos of them torturing animals. And that is the kind of videos that they were watching on the internet, but they were also watching torture videos of people, murder videos of people, not just animals. And that is what Igor and Victor wanted to do. They wanted to create these videos of them torturing and murdering people. And what happens next? It's a little bit iffy. We don't really know the truth. There is a lot of speculation about this next bit. However, at some point, Igor had a girlfriend, which I don't know how any of them ever got girlfriends, but okay. But anyway, Igor had a girlfriend and she knew about his violent side. She knew about everything that he did. She knew about the kinds of videos that he liked to watch on the internet, yet she still stuck around. And one day, Igor went up to his girlfriend and told her that this random person on the internet offered Igor a lot of money if he was to produce 40 snuff films himself. And in case you're not aware, a snuff film is basically a recorded murder. It is a video that depicts a murder that has happened in real life. No editing, no fake, no, a real murder. And apparently this person offered a lot of money for Igor to create 40 different snuff films. Highly disturbing, twisted, illegal, but apparently Igor was really considering this offer. I mean, we know how sadistic Igor is. He has a very violent side. He loves torturing animals. He loves watching snuff films himself. So moving on to people, moving on to creating videos of him torturing people doesn't really seem like that much of a stretch. And like I said, the exact truth of that about someone offering money for him to create snuff films, it's hard to get to the bottom of whether it's true or not. We don't know if Igor agreed to this deal. We don't even know if this deal was real. However, what we do know is that Igor and Victor, they would now embark on one of the deadliest, most horrific, disturbing killing sprees that Ukraine has ever seen. Because on the 25th of June 2007, a young woman called Yekaterina was just at home with her mom and her friend. They were all having dinner, having a good time. And Yekaterina was 33 years old. She was a school teacher. She was known to be very social, very outgoing, just a lovely human being. She was the kind of person that really was friends with everyone. And on this evening at around 10 p.m, the three finished up their dinner. They finished up their evening. And Yekaterina agreed to walk her friend home, which was only down the road. It wasn't that far. So she left with her friend, but she never returned. After walking her friend home, she was just walking back home to herself, and she was less than 100 meters away from her front door when she came across two men that would be known as the Dnipro-maniacs. And who were these two men? Well, of course, it was Igor and Victor. It was on this evening that Igor and Victor decided to go out and find their first human victim to kill. They were lurking in the bushes, waiting for someone vulnerable to walk past them. And Yekaterina, she just walked past them. She was all alone and she was smaller than them. And they jumped out of their hiding place, and Igor pulled out a hammer, which he had wrapped in a plastic bag. And using this hammer, he launched an attack on Yekaterina. He struck her in the side of the head with the hammer, and sadly, this first blow instantly killed her. She fell to the floor, but Igor just continued to strike her face with the hammer over and over again. He struck her face until there was basically no face left. She was completely unrecognizable. Victor and Igor then stole her mobile phone and any other valuables, and they ran off, leaving her body just in the middle of the street, which is just sick that they have just taken an innocent life of this woman. She was just walking home alone. And Yekaterina's mom, she was getting worried because her daughter should have returned home by now. And she could hear that there was a little bit of commotion out on the street. Passers-by were gathered around something on the floor, and Yekaterina's mom went up to what these people were gathering around, and she saw a body on the floor, and it was her daughter. And she didn't even recognize her daughter at first because her daughter literally did not have a face. She only recognized that it was her daughter by the clothes that she was wearing. And it's just so awful to think about her mom discovering her body like that. But were Victor and Igor done there? No, of course they weren't. Because later on, the very same evening, they were fleeing from the crime scene when they came across a 45-year-old man called Roman. And Roman was actually homeless, and he was currently sleeping on a park bench. And Igor walked past him, pulled out his hammer, and started striking Roman in the head over and over again until every bone in his face was broken. And tragically, Roman lost his life instantly. The Necromaniacs had now taken their second victim. But the night wasn't over. I cannot believe it. This is their first night murdering, and now they're going on to their third victim. And this third victim was a man who was also called Victor, and they struck him repeatedly in the head just as he was walking down the street. And thankfully, a woman was nearby and she actually saw the attack. She started shouting and screaming, which made Igor and Victor panic, and they fled the scene. And thankfully, this third man, he survived, but it is scary how quickly they are escalating. And after the two brutal murders, a few days pass by and no one comes looking for them. No one even suspects Igor and Victor. And because no one suspects them, this makes them feel confident and emboldened. So just 6 days after the first two murders, they're at it again. On the 1st of July 2007, the evil duo, they travel to a different nearby town. They take their hammer with them and they prepare for another deadly evening. And this is when they came across a young boy called Yevgenia, who was just 15 years old. But did Igor and Victor care that they were choosing a victim that was so young? No, of course they didn't. They killed indiscriminately. So Igor and Victor attack this 15-year-old boy. They pull out their hammers and they strike him repeatedly in the head. They keep hitting him until he lost his life. Just moments after that murder, they came across another man called Nikolai. They did the same thing to him, struck him multiple times with a hammer until he lost his life. And they had beaten Nikolai's head so badly that his skull had broken into tiny pieces. It is really hard to get your head around the brutality of these murders. And I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to tell you much about the victims, and that's because we don't know a lot of details about a lot of the victims. Some of the victims later on, we don't even know their names. I wish I could tell you more about their lives, but the information is just not out there. And you would think now, at this point, there have been 4 brutal murders and another person that has been brutally attacked. You would think that the police would be doing something at this point, because it is very clear that there is a serial killer on the loose. These murders have all taken place on the night. All of the victims have been beaten to a bloody pulp with a hammer. Their heads have been beaten so severely that they are basically unrecognizable. There are too many similarities between the murders for it to be coincidental, but the police, they just weren't really paying attention. They definitely did not think that there was a serial killer loose, and I'm like, how? It is glaringly obvious that there is a killer on the loose. Igor and Victor as well, they weren't exactly covering up their crimes. The most that they were doing was moving the bodies to a nearby bush. That was literally it. They weren't trying to clean up the crime scene. There was even witnesses to some of the murders and the attacks. The police really did just want to sweep everything under the rug. They didn't think that there was any connection between the 4 murders. So because of this, the Necromaniacs were allowed to carry on their killing spree. So 5 more days pass. No one has come looking for Igor and Victor. It is now the 6th of July 2007, and the evil duo go out to commit their deadliest night yet. And this night started off like every other night. They committed a few robberies because this whole time as well, Igor is still with his pretend taxi, picking up unsuspecting victims, beating them up and robbing them of their valuables. He was still doing that. So this night started like every other night. They committed a few robberies, attacked a few people, and it was later on this evening that the evil duo came across a man called Igor. He had recently been discharged from the army, and on this evening he was actually out celebrating with his friends, and he had drank quite a lot, so he was drunk, and he was currently walking home alone. Igor was almost at his front doorstep when Igor and Victor ran up behind him, pulled out their hammer and struck him on the back of the head. Igor let out the loudest scream, which woke up all of the neighbors in the street, and some of the neighbors actually started looking out of their windows to see what the commotion was all about, and this scared the evil duo, so they ran off. But this is when Igor's mom came outside of her home to see what the commotion was about, and she came across her son's dead body. But the night was far from over, because the duo came across a woman who was walking home on her own, a woman called Yelena. She was working as a security guard. She was walking home. She was a mother, and she absolutely adored her children. She turned the street corner, and approaching her were 2 men. And of course, Those two men were Igor and Victor. And before Yelena even had a chance to react, maybe even get away, Igor pulled out his hammer that he was hiding underneath his shirt, and he repeatedly struck Yelena in the face with the hammer, and she sadly lost her life. But even after she lost her life, Igor continued to strike her on the face until her face was unrecognizable, until she basically had no face, no skull. And when her family had to identify her body, they couldn't recognize a single piece of her. That is how much they destroyed Yelena's face. And the body had to be identified by the hair and the hands alone, which is just absolutely unimaginable. But the evening wasn't over, and the duo came across another woman called Valentina. They saw her just walking down the street, and again they brutally attacked her with a hammer. They attacked her until she lost her life. I truly have no words. This case is so sadistic, and what is just so infuriating is that the police are not doing anything. It is so obvious now that there is a serial killer on the loose, and the fact that they're not even putting out warnings to the public to maybe make sure that they're not alone or to not go out on the evening is crazy. Because we have now covered 7 murders in 2 weeks. And the very next day, on the 7th of July 2007, the duo go on to commit their most horrific murder yet. Because in the early hours of the morning, 2 young boys, Andre and Vadim, they were heading out on a fishing trip. And that is why they were out so early, because they wanted to get to the lake first, they wanted to catch fish, and it was going to be the best time for them to do it. And the most tragic thing about these 2 boys is how young they were. They were only 13 and 14 years old. So they headed out on their bikes to get to their destination when a fake taxi came racing past them. And obviously we know who's in this fake taxi. The fake taxi slammed their brakes on and 2 men got out of the car. Igor and Victor. The 2 boys didn't know what to do, but they knew that they had to get away from these 2 strange men. They tried to ride their bikes past these strange men, but as the 2 boys were trying to get past, Igor and Victor pulled out metal pipes and smashed the 2 boys over their heads, knocking them off their bikes. And Andre, who was only 13 years old, he was knocked out cold instantly. He fell to the floor, he was unconscious, he was not moving. Vadim, who was the older one, so he was 14 years old, he wasn't knocked out. He managed to jump straight back up and he started running as fast as he could. But Victor, he jumped in the car to take chase after Vadim. And that must have been so terrifying because Vadim, he is running as fast as he can down that road, trying to get away from these 2 terrifying men. And Victor is driving after him, chasing him. Vadim managed to make his way to the woodland area that was next to the road. And Vadim was very familiar with the woods. He was very familiar with the area, so he could navigate through the woodland area very well. And he managed to find a hiding space. And Victor could not find him. So thankfully right now Vadim is safe. And Victor, he gave up looking for Vadim. He just couldn't be bothered anymore. So he returned back to Andre, who is unconscious on the floor. And Igor was obviously still with Andre. And now the 2 of them, Igor and Victor, they both start to beat 13-year-old Andre with their metal pipes. And poor Vadim, he was obviously hiding in the woodland area. He can actually hear this whole attack. He is so terrified. He is frozen in fear. And he is listening to these 2 psychopaths murder his best friend, and he is unable to do anything. And I don't use the word psychopath lightly, but these 2 are 100% psychopaths. Now eventually Igor and Victor, they stopped their attack on Andre. I assume they thought that they had killed him, so they drove off. And Vadim managed to make his way back to his best friend, and oh my god, can you imagine what he came across? Because Andre was beaten to a pulp. He was lying in a pool of blood, but he was still alive. I truly cannot believe it. Andre, even though he is barely alive, Andre is fighting for his life. He is barely breathing, but he is still alive. And Vadim couldn't believe it. So Vadim frantically finds someone to help them. Vadim flagged down a car and the person driving the car took both boys to the hospital. But sadly, Andre didn't even survive the journey to the hospital. And this is when 13-year-old Andre was pronounced dead, which is just so horrible to hear. A 13-year-old 14-year-old boy, and Andre is the youngest victim of this evil duo. But if you think all of that was bad, because obviously it was, what happens next is so infuriating, because like I've said multiple times already, the police are not doing anything to try and catch these killers. So Andre has literally just lost his life, and the police arrive at the hospital. They start to question poor Vadim about what has happened, and Vadim is able to give a pretty accurate account of what happened. He's able to accurately describe what Victor and Igor look like. But infuriatingly, the police did not believe Vadim. No, they actually suspected that Vadim murdered his best friend, and he was just coming up with this elaborate cover story. Yeah, you heard that right. The police are now accusing this 14-year-old boy of brutally murdering his best friend. They don't even consider Vadim is telling the truth. They don't even want to listen to him. And I'm like, what the hell? This is now the 8th murder from this duo. The police are aware of these murders. They are aware of the similarities. And now they actually have a star witness to these killers, and they are not listening. So the police detain Vadim. They place him in handcuffs and take him down to the police station where they can interrogate him. And this poor 14-year-old boy, he's already been through so much, and now he is being interrogated by the police because they suspect that he has committed murder. And they question Vadim for hours. His mom turns up at the police station, but she's not allowed in the room. So Vadim is literally on his own with detectives in this interrogation room. But Vadim, he just keeps saying over and over again, I'm telling the truth. It was these two men. I did not do this. And thankfully, Vadim did not change his story. And these officers that were questioning him were being very aggressive, borderline violent with him. It would have been very easy for Vadim to buckle under that pressure and make a false confession. But thankfully, he didn't. He stuck to his guns. He told the truth. And the police had no other option but to let him go. But their treatment of Vadim, especially after he has literally just witnessed his best friend be murdered, and he's also a victim of crime himself, is absolutely appalling. And the fact that they're still refusing to acknowledge that there is possibly a serial killer on the loose is disgusting. It's like, maybe try and find the actual killer of the now 8 victims instead of interrogating children. So after the horrific murder of 13-year-old Andre, even though the police were not doing anything, the public started to think that these murders that were happening in the local area, that they might be connected. The local people heard about Vadim's story and they thought, oh my God, there might be a serial killer, if not serial killers, on the loose. And this is when the people in the local area gave Igor and Victor a name, the Necromaniacs, a name that would be forever tied to them. And if I'm being completely honest, I think it was public pressure that forced the police to actually start looking into all of these murders and actually taking it a bit more seriously. The police looked over the other 7 murders and they finally started to make the connections. They finally thought, oh yeah, maybe there is a connection here. I mean, all of these victims have been murdered in the exact same way. We possibly have a couple of serial killers on the loose. But unbelievably, they still made no public announcement. They didn't even tell the public that there was 2 men on the loose. They didn't set a curfew. They didn't do anything to possibly save more people. And disgustingly, Igor and Victor, they are having a great time. They are loving life right now. They are literally in their element. They couldn't believe it that they were just getting away with all of these murders. It was all one big joke to them. It really was just like a game. They saw human lives as worthless to them. The only worth that they had was for their entertainment. And why have they acted like this? Why have they escalated so quickly? And that is because the pair were absolutely obsessed with gore sites. Remember, we are still in 2007. This is pretty much before social media, especially the social media that we know today. And shock videos were all the rage back in 2007. I even remember them myself. They would get passed around on like MSN or through email. There were very disturbing, horrific videos like 2 Girls, 1 Cup, which I am thankful that I have never seen. But if you are of a certain age, you'll probably know the video that I'm talking about when I say 2 Girls, 1 Cup. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, do yourself a favor and just forget that I ever said that and move on with your life. But these shock videos that would be very gruesome and have brutal beatings or murders or very sexual in nature, they were all the rage and they would end up on gore sites such as rotten.com, bestgore.com, and goregrish.com. And these truly are the worst videos that you can think of that ended up on these kinds of sites. And I'm talking about the worst kind of videos would end up on these sites. I'm talking about murder videos, executions, beheadings, terrorism, burn victims, mutilated corpses. There would also be sexual assault videos on there as well, like rape, genital mutilation, necrophilia. There would also be cannibalism videos on these sites. And they are 100% real. Not fake or anything like that. They are real. They are graphic, they are raw, they are often unedited. It was completely unfiltered. There was no policing. You have to remember, this is pretty much the early days of the internet. You could come across so much stuff back then in 2007 that is not as easy to come across nowadays. And Igor and Victor, they were obsessed with these kinds of videos. They were obsessed with watching snuff films. They were obsessed with watching others torture humans, murder humans. And they would spend hours upon hours watching these films. This was literally their life. And because they were watching such brutal content, that is what inspired them to commit such brutal murders themselves. But what the pair didn't currently realize is that they were about to make possibly the most infamous snuff film that is on the internet, still to this very day. This video would later go viral, and it really has gone down as one of the most infamous gore videos of all time. And this video is titled 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, inspired by the video 2 Girls, 1 Cup. So it is now the 12th of July 2007. The duo make plans to go on yet another killing spree, but this time they wanted to change things up a bit. They wanted to record the whole murder up close and personal. Because so far they had taken videos and photos of the previous murders that we have spoken about, but it's just been of the dead bodies. It hasn't actually been of the murder, of the attack. Nothing to the scale of what they're about to do. So on the 12th of July 2007, the duo got into Igor's unlicensed taxi. They found a very isolated and remote road. It was surrounded by woods and cover. It was the perfect location. And they parked their car on the side of the road and they literally just sat waiting for their victim to come to them. And their plan was that they were going to flag down their victim, pretend to ask for help, and then brutally attack and murder them. And as they were waiting to come across their victim, Victor pulls out his mobile phone. He balances it on the roof of his car and he starts recording a video. He wants to capture the whole thing. So the two men are just stood waiting for their victim, and they are heard talking on the video. They are laughing and joking with one another about what they're about to do, and they are just casually talking about it as if they're talking about the weather. It is just so disturbing. The two of them are making detailed plans, and you can hear Igor saying things like, "We can stop a car just like that, and if it's a big guy, we tell him there's no problem and let him go. And if a little guy comes out, we say, welcome with this." And the this that Igor is referring to is his trusted hammer. And as Igor said, with this, he does pull out his hammer, and this is captured on camera. He actually starts waving the hammer at the camera. He really is playing up to the camera. And they both find this so funny. They're both laughing. They're so excited about what they're going to do. And finally, after they've waited quite a while, a man starts coming down the road riding on his bike. And this was a man named Sergei Yatsenko. And he had no idea what was about to happen to him. And Sergei Yatsenko was 48 years old. He was a family man through and through. He had a wife, 2 sons, a grandson. And it turns out that Sergei had actually come close to losing his life twice already. When he was in his 30s, he was in an accident. He was on a farm. He was driving a tractor when he lost control of the tractor, crashed into a river, and he got pinned under the tractor, underneath the water. And by the time he was freed, he was pronounced clinically dead. But incredibly, a 1 in a million chance, the rescuers managed to resuscitate him and bring him back to life. But then just a few years later, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. He had a massive tumor that was life-threatening, and he had to have incredibly risky surgery, and his chances were not good. Like, he might not even make it through the surgery. But he survived. He pulled through. However, he was left with life-changing consequences. He could now only talk in a whisper, and he was unable unable to form full sentences. But he still had a huge passion for life. He was a family man. He cared so dearly for his mother. And on the 12th of July 2007, he was actually heading to go and see his grandson, which he did at every available opportunity. But sadly for Sergei and his family, things were now about to end in absolute tragedy. Because on this day, Sergei was on the way to visit his grandson and he had chosen to ride his bike there. He headed down the remote road where Igor and Victor were waiting for him. And as he approached the two men, Igor was standing in the middle of the road. Like I said, their plan was to flag someone down. But Sergei, he tried to ride around them. But this is when Igor raised his hammer and knocked Sergei off of his bike. And then everything next just happened incredibly quickly. Victor picked up the mobile phone that was currently still recording. He now walked over to Igor and Sergei because he wanted a close-up shot of what was going to happen. And Victor is there, he's filming up close. Victor and Igor, they're both laughing their heads off. And this is when Igor just repeatedly strikes Sergei over the head with the hammer. The pair then grab Sergei's body and drag him into the nearby wooded area. And all of this is still being captured on camera. The video has never stopped recording. And now that they were under the cover of trees, this is when Igor and Victor begin to torture Sergei in an attempt to make the most horrific, most extreme gore murder video that they could. And it all started with Igor hitting Sergei repeatedly in the face with the hammer over and over again. Sergei can be seen in the video. He is trying to speak, but it's only coming out as a whisper because that's all he can manage because of his throat cancer. Igor and Victor, they just completely ignore his pleas. They actually found it funny that Sergei was trying to talk his way out of this, trying to fight his way out of this, because they knew that they were never going to let Sergei go. And after beating Sergei's face over and over again, Sergei's face was now completely unrecognizable. I've actually seen some images of this video online and I do not recommend you go and look at them, because in the images that I've seen, you can see that Sergei just does not have a face. It's literally just red flesh. Like, I can't even describe it as anything else. It just doesn't even look real. It is just incredibly distressing. And I want to make it clear that I have not watched the video. Do not want to watch the video. I have only seen a couple of images, like screenshots from the video, and even those I wish I hadn't seen. All of the details that I'm telling you about the video are from descriptions online from people that have seen the video. And I have read accounts from people that have seen the video saying that they wish they had never seen it and that it has disturbed them and it will haunt them forever. I cannot stress enough for you to not go and watch that video. Just please, please, please don't go and watch that video. So after Sergei's face has literally been just beaten away, I don't know how else to describe it because there's literally no face. Unbelievably, Sergei is still alive and I truly don't know how. He was gargling through all of the blood. He was fighting for his life. It was so hard for him to even just breathe. And whilst Sergei is literally there fighting for every single breath, Victor still has the mobile phone and he zooms right in on Sergei's face because he wants to capture Sergei struggling to breathe, struggling to survive. And again, Igor and Victor, they are laughing that Sergei is trying to stay alive. But the torture gets worse because now Victor pulls out a screwdriver and pushes it into Sergei's eye socket. And after pulling the screwdriver out, he also removed some brain matter. He then proceeded to shove the screwdriver up Sergei's nose again until he reached the brain. He then also removed both of Sergei's eyes. Victor then drove the screwdriver into Sergei's stomach, piercing the skin, and he continued to drive the screwdriver into Sergei's stomach over and over and over again. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Sergei is still alive. He has been alive throughout this whole torture. He's had some of his brain removed. Both of his eyes have been removed. He has been stabbed in the stomach multiple times. He basically doesn't have a face. I truly don't know how he is still alive. And again, on the video, you can hear Igor and Victor. They are both amazed that Sergei is still alive and they find this hilarious. And it's only adding to the video in their opinion. It's making their gore video even better. And for the next few minutes, the evil duo continue their torture of Sergei. They break both of his arms. They continue to destroy more of his face with the hammer until after 8 minutes of extreme brutal torture, all of which was captured on video. This is the moment when Sergei lost his life and passed away. And honestly, I have no words. That has to be one of the most cold, brutal, extreme murders I have ever come across. And after the murder, Igor said tauntingly to Sergei's body, "What a day for you, huh?" Victor also laughed and he said, quote, "I don't understand how he kept alive. I had the screwdriver like this as I stabbed him. I could feel his brain." Victor and Igor then went off to clean and wash their weapons. They washed the blood off their hands, off of their face, before posing for selfies with Sergei's body, whilst also doing the Nazi salute. And this photo can still be seen online to this very day, and it is chilling. So obviously Sergei never made it to see his grandson, and he never returned home. And his wife was very, very concerned, so she reported her husband missing to the police, but the police said that she had to wait 72 hours before he could be counted as a missing person, which was incredibly frustrating. So Sergei's wife was like, yeah, I'm not waiting 72 hours, and she went out searching herself. She put flyers all over the street. She was asking everyone that she came across had they seen her husband, until a few days later, so probably literally just before the police would bother to do something, a man was out walking in the woods when he discovered Sergei's body. The news made it back to Sergei's wife, and she was just completely heartbroken. And at this point, the public were absolutely terrified. News of Sergei's murder and torture had spread like wildfire across the city, and authorities couldn't manage the panic. Bars and restaurants were empty, tourists were basically non-existent, parents kept their children at home. Things basically came to a halt. But the police kept silent. They didn't give the public any updates on the investigation or what they have found or any advice to the public. The police are literally useless in this case. And whilst this widespread panic was going on, the killings from the duo now go into overdrive. Because over the next 3 days, from the 14th to the 16th of July 2007, Victor and Igor will now go on to kill 2 people every single day. The first of these was a woman called Natalia, who was knocked off her moped, dragged into some bushes, before being completely mutilated with a hammer. And unbelievably, the duo actually committed this murder in front of witnesses. A group of people that witnessed the murder actually chased off the 2 men. But the evil duo, they didn't care. They actually ran off laughing. But sadly, even though they were chased off, it was too late for Natalia. And then for the other 5 victims, we don't know any details about them. We don't even know their names. All we know is that Victor and Igor, they followed the same MO. The choice of weapon was always a hammer. They would always strike their victim over the head. And the skulls of the victims were shattered into tiny pieces. Most of the victims as well were stripped of any valuables, and Victor and Igor would sell off the stolen items to second-hand shops. Some of the victims were mutilated and tortured. Others had their eyes gouged out while they were still alive. And in one extremely chilling case, the pair can be seen on video cutting into a pregnant woman's stomach using a screwdriver before removing the fetus from her womb. And apparently the pair tortured and murdered the fetus, the baby, in front of the mother before they eventually killed the mother as well. It's just so distressing and upsetting to think about. And going forward from Sergei's murder, all of the murders were filmed. They were now creating a very large library of murder content. And this next bit, it really shocked me. And I don't know why, because I don't know why anything this duo does anymore shocks me. But all of the murders that they have committed, Victor and Igor, they attended their funerals of their victims. Yeah, every single one, they went to their funeral. They went unnoticed, which I don't know how, but when they were at the funerals, they would take selfies of themselves holding up their middle fingers towards the victims' coffins. You just can't make this stuff up, can you? And at this point, the investigation from the police was ramping up a lot because the duo, they were losing control. They were, because they were now committing murders in broad daylight. They were committing murders in front of witnesses. So a lot of people were coming forward to the police to hand in their accounts, describe the murderers. So the police had a lot of information to go on. Apparently, authorities had over 2,000 officers on the case looking for them. And I'm sorry if I do not believe that, because 2,000 officers and you couldn't find them. No, don't believe that. It was around this time during the investigation that a woman came forward who had survived an attack from the duo. And this was a 70-year-old woman called Lydia, who was one day just going about her day. She was walking her 3 dogs when she got jumped from behind by Victor and Igor. And they just repeatedly started kicking her in the head. And all 3 dogs were barking at the 2 attackers, trying to get the 2 attackers off of their owner. And sadly, this is when Igor pulled out a gun and shot all 3 dogs with rubber bullets, killing 2 of them. A group of people actually saw this attack and the evil duo got spooked and ran away. So Lydia's life was spared before she became another murder victim. She went to the police. She gave a very accurate description of both of the attackers, but they still were not caught. However, the police seemed to clock onto something, that after every single murder, the killers always stole the valuables from the victim, and then they would sell these valuables to pawn shops and secondhand shops. And thankfully, it was this revelation that led to the evil duo getting caught. Because on the 23rd of July 2007, just 4 weeks after the first murder, on this day, the duo went into a pawn shop to sell one of the mobile phones that they had stolen from one of their victims. But the police were thankfully tracking this mobile phone. So when the shopkeeper turned the mobile phone on to see if it worked, the police were notified that the mobile phone had been turned on and the location. They rushed to the scene and Igor and Victor were still there in the pawn shop. And that was that. After 4 weeks, after 21 murders, both men were caught in a pawn shop selling a mobile phone and they both were arrested immediately. Things now move very quickly because once in custody, both Igor and Victor, they confess to all of their crimes. They do not put up any resistance. They are asked how many murders they committed and Victor responds casually, maybe about 19. And when they were asked why did they commit the murders, Victor just said, Igor likes to kill. So the police ask Igor, why has he committed these murders? How does he feel when he takes an innocent life? And Igor responds in such a cold tone, quote, "How do you feel when you cut a sausage?" Which I don't quite know what he means by that, but I think he just means it means nothing. At the end of the interview, they have confessed to all murders and they are charged with 21 murders and 8 further attacks on other victims. And then remember their school friend Alexander right from the beginning of the video? The one who committed a lot of the brutal attacks and robberies before the murders? Well, Igor and Victor give the police his name as well. And Alexander is also arrested and charged with 2 counts of armed robbery. And they decide to send all 3 men to trial at the same time. And in the weeks leading up to the trial, there was a huge media storm. The local people were outraged, understandably. They were outraged because they had been kept in the dark when 2 brutal, sadistic serial killers were on the loose. There were things that the police could have done to possibly save more victims. And then Victor and Igor's parents came out in defense of them, of course, but thankfully Daddy is not powerful enough to get them off. Victor's parents even tried to destroy evidence to cover up their son's crimes because on the day the police searched their house, parents kept the police waiting outside for over 40 minutes, and during that 40 minutes, the parents went round the house and got all of the stolen valuables from the victims and tried to flush them down the toilet. But thankfully, when the police searched the house, they searched all the plumbing. And they found all the valuables. And when the police searched the homes, they found blood-coated clothes. They found countless number of photos and videos of the murders of the victims. And these photos and videos, they were graphic. They also found all of the videos of them torturing animals. They found all of the selfies from them attending their victims' funerals. And scribbled across one of the photos were the words, "The weak must die, the strongest will win." The police obtained over 300 photos and 5 murder videos. One of those videos was the 8-minute torture and murder of Sergei. And speaking of the video of Sergei, obviously I've said that it went viral, but at this point, the video hadn't been uploaded to the internet. Victor and Igor did not upload that video themselves. So that video should never have seen the light of day because it turns out during During the investigation, one dodgy police officer took a copy of that video footage and uploaded it on the internet. A police officer did that. A police officer is the reason why Sergei's murder video is out there on the internet. And it made it onto popular gore sites such as bestgore.com, rotten.com, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have seen that video. And it's just so heartbreaking to think about Sergei's last moments on this earth and what it has amounted to. And in June of 2008, almost a year after they were caught, Viktor and Igor went to trial along with their friend Alexander. And even though Viktor and Igor had confessed to all of the murders, they pleaded not guilty. Their parents, of course, paid for expensive lawyers the best, and they used every tactic under the sun to get them off. They started by saying that the confession that both of them had given was coerced, that they were both being used as scapegoats, and it was actually the government that was responsible for the murders. They even said that all of the photos and videos were fake and edited, which again is complete BS. And what is just so heartbreaking is that every single photo, every single video, every single murder that was captured on video, all of the animal abuse and torture, everything was played out in the courtroom. So any of the victims' family members that were there in court had to see that. And the whole time, Igor and Viktor, they were just there with the biggest smirk on their face. They were loving this because they were reliving all of the murders. They were seeing the distress that they were causing to the victims' loved ones. But thankfully, by the end of the trial, both Viktor and Igor, they were found guilty on all charges. Igor was found guilty of all 21 murders and Viktor was found guilty on 18 murders. And they were both sentenced to life in prison. And as for their friend Alexander, he was found guilty of the 2 armed robberies that he committed, and he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. And in the aftermath of this case, the video 3 Guys, 1 Hammer went on to have massive ramifications. The so-called Maniacs developed a huge online fan base. Some people admired them, looked up to them, wanted to be them. And unfortunately, people have tried to be like them, tried to produce another video like 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. In 2011, 2 young men from Russia who were given the nickname the Academy Maniacs committed 6 murders with a hammer, and they claimed that they were inspired by the 3 Guys, 1 Hammer video. And more infamously, in 2012, Luca Magnotta, he uploaded a video onto the internet called 1 Lunatic, 1 Ice Pick. And I'm sure most of you know who Luca Magnotta is. He started off just like the Maniacs. He uploaded animal torture videos to the internet where he was suffocating kittens. He then went on to create another video where he dismembered a young man, decapitated him, sodomized his body, and encouraged a dog to eat his remains. And Luca created this video for the sole purpose of trying to recreate a video like 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. He wanted to make a video worse than that. He wanted fame and infamy, and without Viktor and Igor and without the 3 Guys, 1 Hammer video, the crimes that Luca Magnotta might not have even happened. And then when Luca uploaded his video, 1 Lunatic, 1 Ice Pick, people on the internet actually debated, which video is worse, the 1 Lunatic, 1 Ice Pick video or the 3 Guys, 1 Hammer? And I'm like, really? This is not up for debate. We should not be debating these things. And as for the victims that survived in today's case, they were left so traumatized. 14-year-old Vadim, who lost his best friend and was accused of his murder, he is still affected by losing his friend to this very day. He visits Andrei's grave all the time, and he worries that one day Viktor and Igor might be released from prison. The families of the victims are also still suffering. They think about their loved ones every single day. No punishment for Igor and Viktor will ever be good enough. And speaking of the evil duo being released, when I was doing my research, I came across an article that said that they had escaped from prison with machine guns. And for a split second, I believed it because they're the Maniacs and I wouldn't put it past them to be able to escape from prison. But then I quickly found out that the article was fake. It was fake news, which I'm very relieved about, but why would anyone want to create a fake news article saying that they have been released, like trying to make people worry and panic that they're on the run with machine guns. And unfortunately, we don't have much information about the victims in today's case. We don't have any images. We don't even have some of the victims' names. However, for the families of the 21 victims of today's case, I just hope that they're all doing okay and they are recovering in whatever way they need to from the evil that these two men inflicted upon them. So that is everything from me. Today's case was extreme. It was very, very heavy. I have known about this case for quite a few years now, but I didn't realize how brutal and extreme the duo were until I actually started my research. So as always, please let me know your thoughts, theories, and opinions on today's case, and don't forget to leave me your case suggestions in the comments down below because I always want to know what you want to hear next. Thank you again to ExpressVPN for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you all in my next one. Bye.